Welcome. Today, we're going to journey way back in time to get to know one of the oldest cultures on Earth, the San people of Southern Africa. But forget dry textbooks. We're going to do this with a fun quiz that shows just how they mastered survival in some really tough environments. Ready to see how ancient wisdom and incredible ingenuity come together? Let's dive in.
Okay, first up, daily life and tools. I mean, can you imagine having to create absolutely everything you need just from what's right there around you? That's the challenge the San faced every single day. So let's start with the basics. Here is your first question.
So here we go. Why do we call the period the San lived in the Stone Age? The clue is kind of right there in the name. What do you think that says about the main material they had to work with? Have a think.
And the answer is because they made their tools and weapons from stone. Now that might sound simple, but the skill involved was just incredible. Everything from sharp arrowheads for hunting to scrapers for preparing animal hides was expertly crafted from stone. It was literally the cornerstone of their technology.
All right, next question. We hear this word nomadic all the time when we talk about ancient people, but what did that lifestyle actually look like for the San?
Well, it means they lived their lives in motion. So instead of building permanent villages, they followed the rhythm of the land, moving with the seasons and tracking animal migrations. This wasn't just aimless wandering, It was a highly intelligent strategy to make sure they were always where the food and water were.
While the men were often out hunting, the women were the expert gatherers, and their knowledge of the local environment was just vast. Can you name just one thing they would have collected on a typical day?
If you guessed things like honey, berries, edible roots, eggs, or even wild melons, you are spot on. And get this, the food gathered by the women was often the most reliable part of the San diet. It provided consistent nutrition because, the success of a hunt was never a guarantee.
Okay, let's talk about finding water. In really dry places, water can be hidden deep underground. The San had a brilliantly simple tool for getting to it. Any guesses what it was?
Would you believe it? They used a thin reed, basically a completely natural straw. It's such a simple, genius solution to a life-or-death problem, allowing them to sip water right from sources hidden deep under the sand.
Now this is what I find so interesting. They wasted nothing. An empty ostrich eggshell wasn't trash. It was a super valuable resource. Can you think of two different ways they might have used them?
They used them for two completely different things, storing water and making jewelry. Those big, tough shells were the perfect natural canteens for a nomadic life. But they also broke them into small, smooth pieces to create beautiful beads for necklaces and bracelets. It's this perfect blend of practical and artistic.
Okay, so we know they stored water in ostrich eggshells, but in the blazing heat of southern Africa, how did they keep that precious water cool and fresh? What was their natural refrigerator?
You got it. They buried them. By digging down into the cooler earth and burying the water-filled eggshells, they used the ground's own natural insulation to keep their water supply cool and stop it from evaporating. So clever.
Sticking with that theme of using every single thing you have, let's talk about clothes. What natural material do you think was essential for protecting them from the sun and the cold?
They used prepared animal skins. And again, this shows just how resourceful they were. The hide provided the material, bones were carefully carved into sharp needles, and sinew, that's the tough tissue from animals, was turned into strong thread. I mean, absolutely nothing from a hunt went to waste.
You are doing great. Let's move on from tools and clothing to two other cornerstones of survival, shelter and medicine. This next part explores how the San stayed safe and how they used the healing power of plants. So their shelters had to be really adaptable. I mean, what they needed in a hot, dry summer was totally different from what they needed in a cooler, maybe wetter winter. So where did they live during these different seasons?
In the summer, they'd build these temporary shelters from grass and branches, nice and airy. But in the winter, they'd move into the more permanent and protective shelter of caves. This is just a perfect example of how in tune they were with the changing seasons.
Okay, now for medicine. This is so fascinating. The San had a deep understanding of plants, like a walking, talking natural pharmacy. Imagine being on a long hunt with very little food or water. There was a specific plant they used to keep hunger and thirst away. Do you happen to know its name? The answer is the hoodia plant. By chewing on this succulent, hunters could actually suppress the feeling of hunger and thirst for a really long time. This was a massive advantage, allowing them to track animals over huge distances and get back to their families successfully.
Let's try another one. For more common problems, like inflammation or infections, they had another go-to plant in their medical kit. What was this one called?
That one is called the bushu plant. And what's incredible is that the San recognized the healing properties of this plant centuries before modern science even knew what it was. It's just an amazing example of ancient medicinal knowledge.
Okay, last question for today. So, knowing which plants to use is one thing, but knowing how to use them is a whole other level of skill. Can you name some of the different ways the San actually prepared and used their plant-based medicines?
Their methods were incredibly varied and sophisticated. They might burn plants and have people inhale the smoke, or they'd grind them into a powder and mix it with animal fat to put on the skin. They also boiled them in water to make a medicinal tea, or used them as part of sacred healing ceremonies. It just shows their knowledge was so much more than just eat this plant. It was a complex system of medicine. From turning stones into tools to transforming plants into cures, the San people show us what a profound understanding of the world looks like. It's a powerful reminder of how much wisdom there is in living in harmony with nature. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.